but we have an exciting panel on the conversation of energy with some of the most outstanding leadership around the country of some people who really get it and really understand the issue of energy, but also understand the issue of diversity. And I couldn't be prouder, I think, of the things that Illinois has to be proud of. They can say that they are the number one when it comes to the best leadership in utilities and for the biggest commitment to diversity that I've seen. And as a national leader, I get a chance to travel around the country, so I can say that unbiased, that they have done an outstanding job, and my hat's off to all of them. Well, this time it gives me a pleasure to turn this panel over to a good friend, a friend of all of us, a friend of Black business, minority business, no other than Senator James Claiborne, past senator. He used to be the majority leader of the Senate. He runs a incredible law firm and a good friend of ours. Senator James Claiborne, I am turning this panel over to Senator James Claiborne, and it's his show, and we will listen in and enjoy this incredible dialogue with some exceptional leaders here.
You know, Larry, I want to thank you for your leadership and all that you've done and what you continue to do for the various communities that the utilities provide services for, as well as our personal relationship. And I appreciate all the things you do. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be a part of this panel as a moderator. And, you know, I want to thank Richard Mark of Ameren for joining, Justin Ladner of Illinois American Water, John Hudson of Nicor Gas, and Charles, I don't know what that is on your lip, but Charles Matthews of People's Gas, North Shore Gas. And great seeing you again, Michelle. So, you know, this has been an interesting week, well, the last couple of weeks for at least four of you all. And Justin, we're happy for you to be on there, and we look forward to your comments as well, and addressing some of the issues and concerns you have. I know it's been a 3-year process. It has been a challenge in terms of coming together, but I'm very appreciative of my former colleagues with their forward thinking and coming to some level of status that can be transformational for your companies, as well as, again, Illinois leading the charge on energy reform. So right there, I'd like to start with, you know, just basically asking the question: how was signed into law now, how has Senate Bill 2408 impacted your companies?
I guess I should be a gentleman and defer to Michelle, but I don't want to put her on the spot. You know, I know she's been involved in these negotiations, but I would just say, you know, the bill was just signed about 2 hours ago. I think at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock today, the governor signed the final bill. I just left the meeting a few minutes ago, and one of my lead team that brought in the actual hard copy of the legislation, and it was about 3 inches thick, the hard copy. So there's over 1,000 pages there, and we're still digesting part of it. But, you know, just to kind of give, you know, a high level overview of what I see, there's some very good things in the bill. I think there's some things that, you know, from a utilities perspective, still gives us the opportunity to make significant investments in the infrastructure and the grid. You know, I've done customer surveys for the last 20 years here at Ameren, and every year for that 20 years, there's 2 things at the top of that survey, and it'll flip-flop from year to year depending on what happens, but it's either reliability and affordability. Those are the 2 constants that people want. They want to know when they flip the switch or they turn on that natural gas stove or furnace that the energy is going to be there, and they want to be able to afford it. And so, you know, from that perspective, I think the reliability aspect will be able to still make some investments. in the system. It'll allow us to keep building that infrastructure. There's a couple unique things for Illinois, Ameren, Illinois, that we're going to be able to do that will be exciting. For example, we're going to be, for the first time, I think Ameren, Illinois will be able to build a solar facility, a community solar facility in East St. Louis and one in Peoria, Illinois. So that's exciting to bring those to those two communities. But on the other hand, I do have some concerns about a number of programs that have been included in this. And I think there's about 8 or 9 different programs that exceed several $100 million a year that customers are going to have to pay for and on their utility bill. Philosophically, I don't know if I agree that those types of programs should be on a utility bill or not. And I think customers will have to make that decision, but it will push that customer bill up. And that's going to be a challenge going forward. And so I think it's going to, there's some very good aspects to maintain reliability. I think I am personally concerned about the affordability, and I'm personally concerned about the ability of the state to be able to implement some of these massive programs that they say are dedicated to minority communities. Will the money actually get there? And that's our concern. Will these dollars get to the communities that they've been hyped to basically benefit? But from FEJA, my personal experience has been the same thing I heard there with some of the solar development programs are going to go into low-income neighborhoods. That hasn't happened. We have 2 of them. We're going to make sure it happens in those 2 neighborhoods. I'm worried about it happening in other neighborhoods and cities across the state.
And Richard, you raise a good question. In one of the comments in the debate, there was a comment made that said the state of Illinois is pushed towards an ambitious goal of $350 million annually to the pot of money funding renewable projects. And I know this bill's creating some kind of hub zone, and they're going to use the current $300 million towards these projects instead of giving it back to the ratepayers. I think that is an issue that has to be addressed. And since everybody's paying for it, all ratepayers are paying for it, there should be some assurance that we create a level of equity to make sure that those who really need to save in terms of their bills, that they get a chance to use the net metering, they get a chance to use the rebates and other programs that will be developed as a result of this legislation.
I agree. And maybe, I know we've had conversations about this before, but, when all of these dollars are being spent for programs, every customer pays for them. And I guess my concern is many times in minority communities, low income, moderate income customers don't have the ability to take part in those programs, even though they're paying into those programs on a monthly basis. And so I think that's all of our job and our opportunity and our responsibility to keep pushing the state to make sure that everyone who pays into these programs and the people that are most in need are the ones that are able to also benefit from those programs.
And it appears, Michelle, that in Chicago, you all are somewhat going to have, I would call it a pilot program. It just hasn't been extended to the entire state as it relates to creating opportunities for more electric stations and more incentivized for more electric cars. How do you think that's going to affect ComEd, and what are your opinions on Senate Bill 2408?
And similar to Richard, we're still absorbing and we'll get understand all the aspects of the bill. It's about 800 pages the last time I saw. So we're still going through it to really understand what are the different aspects, and focused on how do we help make this successful. I always go back to, I'm just an engineer. So I always think about what is the impact on the grid, more renewables, which is great. How do we enable that? certainly. So we're going to be focused on enabling the new technology, more renewables, more EVs, in terms of not just from the perspective of the technical perspective, but also the customer impact. Okay, how do we mitigate that? The other piece that we know that's a big part of this bill is energy efficiency, and also programs focused on bringing more energy efficiency programs to low income, moderate income customers. So we're still sort of in the process of absorbing what's in it, and immediately going into how do we make this work? How do we make this successful? What actions do we need to take? So in terms of what do we think about this bill, we're still kind of absorbing it and looking forward to ultimately promoting and bringing clean energy to Illinois, which is, I think, consistent with our vision as well.
You know, and I want to commend all of you all for your investment in infrastructure. As a result of your investment in infrastructure, you've created jobs, and for the most part, you've created transformational opportunities for minority-owned businesses here in the state of Illinois. I heard one of my friends at Trice Construction say about 3 years ago that when, or maybe it was longer than that, that after her first year of really being engaged with the utilities, she tripled her revenue. And I know since then she's expanded opportunities. She's received other opportunities, other parts of the state, also in Missouri. So how, if you know or not, how will those vendors, particularly African-American business, be impacted, if you know, in a positive or negative way based upon this new bill, this new law, rather?
Senator, let me try to answer your question. I do want to kind of make comments a little bit on your first question. And I know these are preliminary comments for all of us. As Richard and Michelle said, we're all trying to absorb all of this information. But the first thing I'd like to say is I'd like to applaud the legislature because I think the intent was to set Illinois on a path toward a clean energy future like all of us want. Unfortunately for the gas-only folks, it excludes natural gas decarbonization technologies in the definition of clean energy. And all of us are working on these efforts, whether it's renewable natural gas or hydrogen, any of these, none of this was included in that language. So, you know, that is a challenge for the gas-only folks. And it's not like, I don't want to speak for the other, you know, Justin and Charles, but we're all former electric people, all of us, you know, so we get and understand, you know, what's happening on the electric side. But unfortunately, gas was excluded, you know, from the language. And so, you know, that, you know, trying to address the question that you asked, you know, anytime an opportunity is created to invest in infrastructure, whether it's renewable or sort of the traditional infrastructure, it creates opportunities for minority businesses. And for us, you know, right now, as it stands, we won't be participating in that. So that is something that we're trying to pay attention to. And we certainly want to, you know, work with the legislature in future sessions to address natural gas.
You know, appreciate your comment, John. That's interesting because I think the floor debate in the House, there were some issues addressed about rates and also the equity piece on making sure everybody would be included. And one of the comments was, we know that we would have to come back and make changes or add some additional language to address some of the other issues. So I assume, I guess you know what they say about assuming, but you know, all throughout the session and last year and part of this year, gas was being discussed, but they said they didn't have time to get to it. So with that open-ended comment, I make the assumption that there's a possibility this could be addressed in the future. So are there some issues that I know three of you all are involved with gas that you would like to see moving forward to continue to assure that one of the biggest outcomes of what we did a few years back was the creation of jobs and giving you all the ability to create a sustainable and reliable system that also involved creating jobs and moving the state forward economically.
James, I'll chime in first here, and I'll piggyback on some of the things John said. But I first have to piggyback on what you noted about my lip, and I'll tell you, James, that I've been in this business for 40 years now, and I've never had enough time to even attempt to put some hair on my lip. So it took a pandemic for that to happen. So let me live, as you say, let me live my best life, okay? and thank you for hosting this panel today. I like to just make a few comments and sort of piggyback on some of the things that Richard, Michelle, and John have said, and I'll go back and talk about what's good about this bill. And there are some good things about this bill. And what I like about the bill is it sets some dates out there. Some days, 35, 45, 50 for different targets. And I think that's important for several reasons. One, while John said and correctly said that gas, in this legislation is not defined as a clean energy, it certainly acknowledges, based on the timelines, that gas is going to be a major player in meeting these targets. So to me, that in and of itself may not be the ultimate victory that the gas-only utilities wanted, but it was a strong acknowledgement that we don't get there without natural gas, especially in the near term in terms of meeting those targets. So that's number one. Number two, those targets look very similar to the targets that the industry have already set. So those are targets that we think we can meet, and obviously we know and included natural gas in there. And three, this has been a roller coaster to get to this point. And there have been some points in time during the discussion of this legislation where some of these infrastructure projects were being the contemplation was that they did not need to exist. So we've gone from not even having some of these modernization programs included in the legislation or allowed to continue to clearly now being allowed to continue. So that is fantastic. Thirdly, I will tell you that those deadlines, those target dates, are critical because the other thing that's acknowledged is that technology, gas will have to be a real critical player in meeting those targets and technology. So, those dates allow technology to continue to develop. So I do applaud, the legislation for setting some reasonable and consistent deadlines. Now to piggyback just quickly on something Richard said, I share Richard's concern. We have a proven track record, and you talked about opportunities, especially with those infrastructure modernization programs that we have out there now. And we had our symposium at the ICC yesterday, and Senator Claiborne, a lot of this, credit goes to you. But yesterday, we've reported our biggest numbers yet, and every year we report bigger numbers as it relates to diversity spend. And you referred to Stephanie. I know her story well, and there are so many other great stories out there. But we haven't seen that on the renewable side. And one of my frustrations, and I know I share this with my colleagues, is every year, we have this group that march down to Springfield with this renewable flag and talking about all of the economic opportunity they're going to give our communities. And yet I don't see those numbers. So, we have a proven track record. I just hope the legislators hold, that segment, those stakeholders accountable for the same kind of results that they've held us accountable for and that we've delivered on. So obviously, we have a good roadmap out there how you get there. They should have to go down that same path using a roadmap, I think, very similar to the one we've used. Commitment, commitment, commitment.
And anybody want to respond to that? Charles, you bring up a great issue on accountability, because I know my former colleagues and Will Davis has raised this issue, and Napoleon Harris and others, I don't want to leave anybody out, have raised this issue on the labor side, but it's just as important on the economic side as an entrepreneur, that accountability to be made in both parts. You know, I know discussions I've had with Richard in the past where he was building out his labor force in terms of linemen and making sure that those were issues that were present. Had similar conversations with John and had similar conversations with Justin about making sure that the labor force is representative of the communities. And my colleagues, I'm sure, are going to monitor this. And it should also be something, I think, that the ICC would monitor as well, to make sure that everybody's benefiting equitably from this new law. Any responses to that other than what Charles said?
Well, I would just add, Senator, and just for the audience that's out there, you mentioned linemen and gas technicians. One of the things that we've done at Ameren, Illinois is, we have our own apprenticeship program. So I would encourage, we've got an effort that's going on to try to increase minority involvement in the lineman program and in our apprentice programs. So, we have an apprentice program that if someone gets into that program, as we put our list together, then we partner with the IBEW. So, you might have a class of 6, and 6 of those potential candidates come from Ameren, 6 come from IBEW. We put those together. So, and then once they all complete and become journeymen, they all become IBEW employees. So that's one way that we can help as utilities increase the number of minorities that are in the building trade, that are in the labor trades, by using our apprenticeship programs to help bring minorities into the utility business. And that's, as you look online, and we'll have these programs throughout the year, but the more minorities we can get to apply for those programs, and there's a process, there's a testing and those types of things. But that's one of the things I think you'll see in the next few years, the utilities trying to get more minorities to apply for those types of positions, and not just males, females. One of the areas that we've had some success, small successes, is getting females in our gas technician. It's a great opportunity for the right person that's interested. It's hard work, it's outside work, but we've got it's a non-traditional field for females, but we have a number of women who have become gas technicians, and, starting off at an apprentice salary of $75,000 a year and working up from there. So great training program, great opportunity to earn good money. But, those are all things that I think the people that are listening in and are on this call and could really help the utilities with, of driving more people to our career work, our web pages, and applying for those jobs, and talking to us and finding out more about where those jobs will be in the future. Because, the average apprentice, the average lineman now is, over 55 years. As for us, it's about 55. We're going to be needing more of those in the future. So we encourage people to get involved in the utility business. I think there'll be a great opportunity for them for careers.
I would add, in the craft area, we really tried to increase the diversity of our craft group as well the last couple of years. A couple of programs we put in place. And in a way, sort of you come into a utility and you go through line school to become a lineman, and there's several grades from there. So we've created entry positions for people to come in and sort of just participate and be helpers on a crew, and they get the opportunity to go to line school and hopefully ultimately get into these journeyman lineman type of roles. We've also initiated a workforce development program where we have part of a group in our organization that is working with community groups to bring candidates in to these entry programs. And we really have been focused on diversifying the entry programs that ultimately get you to the craft positions over the last couple of years, and have been pretty successful. So we have the jobs posted, but we're also proactively working with community organizations to kind of look and find us candidates and let them know that these jobs are there. And that effort has been pretty successful in expanding at least a diverse pool of people that will ultimately go into and become sort of craft and linemen in our groups. So those are the types of things we've been doing.
With comments that were made in the debate about increasing portions of the state's energy produced by renewables from 8 to 40% by 2030, and 50% by 2040. John or Charles, how would that affect your companies?
Well, for us, I think that those deadlines aren't unrealistic. In fact, at NICOR, we have an objective of being net zero in terms of our impact on the environment from our system by 2030. Now, we would need renewable natural gas projects in order to make that work. And the ICC has allowed us to do that. So we've got a pilot project right now where we're executing on renewable natural gas. And so we believe we can get there. Again, I applaud the legislature for being forward thinking this way. The only thing that I would encourage the legislature to do is to continue talking to the utilities to make sure that we can help them meet these objectives. It's not that these objectives are crazy or bad. They're great objectives, but we all need to be a part of the solution because all of us are thinking this way to begin with. Another thing I'd like to applaud the state legislature on is Pembroke Township. We had a piece of legislation in the legislature in this earlier session that allowed us to extend our infrastructure into that community. And for those who don't know the economic circumstances in Pembroke Township, they really need infrastructure, not just natural gas infrastructure, broadband and everything else. And so we're committed to helping them do that. And I think the legislature, they're focused on the citizens in the state of Illinois. And all of us, I think, as utilities, really embrace this idea of corporate empathy. I know we're doing it. I know the programs that the other utilities have, they're doing it as well. So, a lot of these ideas, Senator, are not ridiculous ideas. It's just really figuring out how to work with the utilities to help them reach these objectives.
And Senator, I'll just chime in and say, agree with John that, the target they've set for renewables, the increase in the state, and by the year you referenced, it's doable. It's doable. That's not the question. The real question, and this is where we need additional time to figure out the full game plan. We know how to get the renewables out there at that level. What we don't know today is how to maintain a reliable system. Even if you increase renewables by the 40% or the whatever number is in the legislation, that in and of itself does not produce or result in a reliable system that customers deserve and expect. So, that's the real question. How do we take that and complement that growth in renewables with other clean technologies to still have a reliable system? So that becomes the real question.
You know, number one, thank you, Larry and Senator and John, Richard, Charles, and Michelle for allowing me to kind of join in. I've been listening to you guys, and John mentioned my background, and I do have experience with electric and gas, and I'm not near as familiar with the bill as you guys and the 800 to 1,000 pages that come with it. But it's quite clear there's conflict and tension in what the goals are. And with that, we got to figure out the game plan, like you're talking about, Charles. You know, Richard, you mentioned reliability and affordability. And that's true for my space. That's true, I think, in any utility, because we all have infrastructure investment needs. And with that comes a cost, which is the affordability tension piece. But I would venture to say there's a third conflict and piece of tension in here, which is the environmental conscious nature of where everybody wants to go. So we got to maintain reliability. We got to keep it affordable, but then how are we going to factor in furthering environmental conscious goals? And that just adds to the complexity and realistic glide path to try and get there. And I certainly sympathize with John and the renewable natural gas. And there's got to be a transition plan here to ultimately get to those goals that we agree that are realistic, but they're only realistic if we got a fully vetted plan between now and then. And that just takes time and iterations and just constructive dialogue. But the other thing I want to chime in real quick on is just the workforce piece. You know, as I listen to you guys, I want to highlight where there's commonalities with what we have in the water and wastewater industry. And, you know, workforce challenges are really number one on my risk list. And with that comes the current age of our employees. You know, Richard talked about that. There's an opportunity here to train the next generation of utility workers. Let's make sure that we're intentional when we do that, that we are focusing on diversity and how we can do that. And for us, it's, you know, we're not as far along as Richard's apprenticeship program, but we're trying to reach out to our labor partners. We're trying to reach out to the community as well as the technical schools like SIUE here, and they've got a environmental resource training center to try and create a pipeline ourselves. But I would also say high schoolers, you know, we have a lot of jobs that you don't even have to go through the union that are good paying jobs. So we're trying to do a better job of doing tours of our water plants and even wastewater, which certainly on the surface may not be appealing to a high schooler who's used to, you know, other types of technology and things. So I agree that we've got to work on that. And this bill, I think, may even give us some templates on how we can try and do better.
Justin, since you raised that, I just wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to even elaborate a little more on some of the things that you're doing. You know, with the challenge that was experienced in Michigan, I know that your company has taken a position to try to, I guess, indirectly or directly alleviate some of the concerns with clean water and contaminated old systems, where in many instances, the municipalities or entities that own these systems are not increasing the fees in order to properly maintain those. And I know you have some opinions about that. You want to elaborate a little bit, and it's particularly House Bill 415.
Yeah, sure. And again, it goes back to this tension around infrastructure investment and affordability and true cost of services. And for us, a lot of times we're being compared to municipalities, as you mentioned, and there's a lot of opportunity for a municipality to perhaps not invest in their system, not do the proactive maintenance, and or potentially subsidize the true cost of the service they're providing via other means that they've got. So you've got a customer that may be getting inadequate service and also may not have a full realization, number two, of the cost of it. To your point, something that we try and do is really partner with municipalities here in Illinois where they don't have the means, the expertise to continue to invest in their system as they need to ensure that all their customers have that clean, safe, reliable water. We've done a good job of, you know, legislation enabling mechanisms for us to come in and provide a fair price for those systems and then rehabilitate them to ensure that those customers get what they need and a Flint never occurs. What we have seen in more recent years is similar challenges on the wastewater side. And, it's taken a long time to raise awareness around water. It's out of sight, out of mind. The pipes are, underground, turn the faucet, don't think twice about it. Wastewater is an area that we are really seeing in a lot of communities, especially down here in the Metro East. There's a couple where the system is in such state of disrepair that raw sewage is in front yards. Raw sewage is getting in the basements of homeowners, where quite oftentimes their biggest source of investment is their home, and they don't have other choices. And it's because of significant neglect, quite honestly. What we would like to do is to be able to go into those communities and provide support. Similar, John mentioned, I think, Pembroke, a certain community that was distressed, and how NICOR is focusing on that. There are communities around here where we would like to do the same thing. The challenge is providing that needed investment to make sure that raw sewage is in the front yard or getting into a basement is done where rates don't spike as a result, because it's a small community and there's not a lot of customers with which to allocate that investment. So we came up with a bill 415 that allowed, under certain circumstances, only after showing prudency and public interest, that our commission would say you could share the revenue for that wastewater with a larger base of water customers. So bottom line, a small community that needed a sewer revamp, they would not bear the full cost of doing that immediately. That would likely be not affordable, to kind of go back again to that infrastructure affordability tension. And it would allow us to allocate a small portion of that to a larger water customer base. And unfortunately, we weren't successful in the last session with this, but this is something that we're not going to give up on, because it's a means by which we can really partner with some distressed communities to make sure that those customers get the basic service that everybody's entitled to.
And I want to kind of bring everybody back into that with that lead, Justin. One of the big issues you all are going to have, in my mind, is this issue that AARP addressed and the renewables addressed, and that's going to be, and Richard touched on it, is pricing. You all sent out the bills, and you all are going to directly be blamed for the increase. Now, there's different opinions as to what the increase is going to be, but I was in the legislature, and I remember we were looking at raising, or we were asked to raise taxes by 10% to dedicate that to the home health care workers. And when the home health care workers came in, and I talked to her about the deficit, and she says, I understand that, but you better not vote to raise my taxes. That's what she understood, that I was going to raise her taxes. And the five of you all are going to be blamed for raising fees, costs, bills. You all have any opinions on and maybe that's not a good question, but how are you all going to address those issues, that issue?
Well, I think all of us, I think you certainly heard it from Richard, who expressly said it. All of us are concerned about affordability. All of us. I think that is a central focus for us. You'll probably see announcements from us for a large bill payment assistance program where we're partnering with the Salvation Army to focus on that. There are challenges. There are communities, in Illinois that have huge economic challenges. I talked about Pembroke, but there are a number of others. And so we all, I think, are focused on that, at least NICOR is. One issue I did want to bring up, I want to make sure that the audience really can see the connections here James, when we think about supplier diversity, NICOR achieved almost 50% of the company's sourceable spend with minority, women, and veteran-owned business enterprises, almost $450 million. And so I can brag about it, but so can everyone else who's on this call today. But the lion's share of that spend came from our investments in pipeline infrastructure through QIP, which is the Qualified Infrastructure Plant legislation that was approved, about a decade ago, and it's about to sunset in 2023. That pipeline replacement work not only has created the opportunity for that spend, about 70% of that spend is because of that investment in our infrastructure, but it's also reduced our operational emissions by 65%. So when we put in new pipe, emissions go down. When we put in new pipe, minority businesses get paid. There's that connection there. Infrastructure investments reduce emissions, and they also create opportunities for Black businesses. And so I want to make sure that everyone understands that when we think about future legislation.
Yeah, and we're very similar in that regard. When we replace pipe, John, it's not necessarily an emissions, but it's a non-revenue water, which again, that downstream means we have to run our pumps less, which also affects energy impacts. When we grow those different communities that have infrastructure needs, we're able to partner with more contractors in those new communities, which again, helps with minority opportunities. And it's just something we've got to continue to message to stakeholders so that they understand all of the different impacts.
I think, thanks for noting that. I think this whole group was at the hearing at the ICC, Illinois Commerce Commission yesterday, talking specifically about diverse business and work that this group has done through the IUBDC or DBC, created the CEOs of the utilities in Illinois, working together to drive and increase minority business participation in our work. And I think there's some similarities in that through this effort, through the focus, all of us have significantly increased participation of minority businesses in our work. A lot of it is in infrastructure work, and there's still more to do. Those were sort of the key points that I think everyone reiterated. But really, I think you need to give yourselves a pat on the back for what you've done, what you've achieved so far. I think the number was like $6 billion that the major utilities in Illinois have spent with minority businesses over the last few years. That's significant. ComEd last year, we spent almost $900 million with diverse businesses. We look to continue to grow that, and that's a key focus for us as we look at the impact of this bill. So this legislation is going to increase solar development, right? A more increase in solar, increase in storage, energy efficiency. And as the people who are participating in this conference, you need to think about where your businesses are situated now. What are our needs as we look at the types of work that are going to be the outcome of this bill? It's going to be in solar. It's going to be engineering, project managers, craft as well, but the professional services, the sort of technical areas, construction areas, are areas that we see are going to be growth areas and opportunities for small businesses to do business with us.
And James, I'll just add that to your question, how do you deal with the bill as we talk about affordability, acknowledge the fact that bills are going up because of these various programs, not just the legislation that was signed in today, but prior legislation, which John spoke of as it relates to the gas utilities. And I think everybody, has hit on the real critical piece that has to go with that. That is, what are you getting for this incremental price. And we as utilities, as leaders, we have to continue to do not just a good job, but a better job of communicating what our customers are getting in terms of reliability, in terms of safety, in terms of reduction of methane and carbon, in terms of supplier diversity dollars. We got to continue to get our message out as to what they're getting. Now, I will say this is somewhat selfishly that the good news is about the legislation today, most of the next wave of increases won't be on the gas utilities. I think they're going to be on the electric utilities. So, I'm going to turn this over to Richard. He's already talked about that, but we've all been there before. Michelle said it exactly right. We've been there before. We've done this. We know how to do this. We've done a good job of communicating, what customers are getting for these incremental costs, whether we agree with all of them or not. But we will continue to have to do a better job because it's the right thing to do. At the end of the day, customers, expect reliability, safety, and a cleaner environment.
James, I would just add that, the one thing that concerns me, even more so than the additional programs that have been added in this legislation, is just, having the necessary capacity to meet the energy needs of our customers. In Chicago area, Michelle's got a little different issue being in PJM. However, because they have the nuclear plants there that can provide enough energy for all of the customers in that area. There are over 3 million customers that ComEd has. For our service territory in the southern part of the state, 80% of our energy now is from coal and gas powered plants. And if those plants close, there's a question. I mean, it's not even a question. It's for sure that if a number of those plants close, Southern Illinois will be short on having enough energy to meet the needs. Therefore, we'll have to buy it outside of our zone. And what that could drive up capacity prices significantly for us, for right now, for capacity prices to have the necessary energy on standby in case we need it. We're paying about $5 a megawatt hour. We could see that skyrocket easily to over $150 to $200 a megawatt hour. You have a similar situation where we saw in January in some of the states where gas prices were needed and they needed extra gas and had to buy it on the spot, and gas prices skyrocketed. So that's our big concern going forward. What are the capacity prices going to be as these plants close? And if any of them close early, it's going to drive up capacity prices for us. And I thought it was ironic last week when we're pushing in Illinois to get this bill passed. And in Indiana, they were pushing a bill to allow the utilities to build more natural gas powered plants so they could sell it to Illinois when we run short. So, we're actually going to be an economic development tool for Indiana, Missouri, Kentucky, other states that we're going to have to go buy energy from them. So I think that's what John talked about. If you have the utility people at the table when you negotiate and you're talking about and you're planning strategically these things, you can point out where those pitfalls are going to be. But when you have people who plan it that maybe have the best interest of the planet and climate in hand, but they don't know how to get there or know how to do it in a way that's going to not, be detrimental, we're going to run into some hurdles out there that we're all going to have to face going forward. What those hurdles are going to be like, and can we get reasonable people to sit down in a room and talk about a strategy that works for everyone, not just certain groups. So I think that's going to be the important thing.
You raise a very interesting question too. Over time, it's my opinion that from cursing through this legislation, perusing through this legislation, that in some instances, right there in your home, people are going to be forced to make a choice between whether to have a gas stove or an electric stove. And that issue has not been raised, and I'm not sure if everybody really understands that that's a real issue personally. So I guess we will continue to trust in the legislature and the governor's office that those issues will be addressed, and we will make some, I guess, continue to move forward in legislation, and hopefully you all will be a part of that discussion. You know, I think going back to affordability, and I think affordability and reliability are really one and the same. And I don't think most consumers, ratepayers really understand those two terms. I remember when I was in the legislature and we went through deregulation, you know, the real issue was people were comfortable with hitting that switch and the lights coming on. And they didn't know what all went into the mix. So I think it's important that you all are at the table because you all are the experts as it relates to what's affordable and what's reliable. I know in this legislation, formula rates was eliminated. And I believe that there were some perceptions that formula rates wasn't I guess, efficient, cost increase in cost. But then I've heard too that in some instances, and I saw this when I was in the legislature, rates actually went down as a result of formula rates. What are your thoughts about having basically going back to a rate case, the traditional rate case, or looking at this new term of performance rates?
I can start over. What I can say is over the last 8 years, with the investments that ComEd has made in the system, from AMI as well as system, right, smart grid, et cetera, our customers have seen about a 70% improvement in reliability, fewer outages, shorter outages. When you look at the average bill, it's about the same where it was in 2008. So from our perspective, customers got the value, and for the money that they're paying, significant value. There were performance metrics in EIMA. Richard knows this. We report every year on specific performance metrics that we had committed to, and we report that to the ICC. And if we didn't meet certain performance metrics, our return was impacted. So the concept of constant rate increases, what's the value, and there were no performance requirements. There were. So just wanted to kind of make sure that those are the facts. Moving forward, we want to continue to invest. I think I mentioned it before. Our focus is on ensuring that we have the same vision around bringing more clean energy, a clean energy Illinois. That's going to require some investment in the grid. It's going to require the grid to operate differently, function differently. The investments that we've made so far are getting us ready for that, have helped get us ready for that. But there's going to be more work to be done in order to enable all this technology, this solar, everything that we want to do. So that's the reality. And we do want to do it, continue to do it as cost effectively as possible.
Yeah, Michelle brings up a great point, and I really struggled with what the problem that some of these so-called consumer groups had with formula rates. Formula rates, I think, were great for the customers. It was passed in 2010, implemented in 2011. We made over $1 billion of investments to upgrade our infrastructure. As Michelle said, reliability has improved dramatically. The number of outages decreases, the duration of outages has decreased. And at the same time, at Ameren, Illinois, our rates today are lower than they were in 2011. Where else can you get $1 billion investment and not have your rates? Now, by switching and going to this other form of rate making, there's gonna be increases. And it amazes me, the consumer groups never said a word. The consumer groups that out there that criticize the utilities for every penny spent are not speaking out at all about those renewable energy, and some of these other programs could raise rates. And I've seen everything from some groups say $3, and AARP says $15, but they never came out and opposed any of these programs, any of these renewable energy projects. They've sat on the sidelines and then kind of like Monday morning quarterback it. And I just think you've got to have people making this policy decisions who are knowledgeable, who are really thinking through these programs. They jump out there and they say, oh, we need to get rid of this. And you said, I sit there from a business standpoint and say, this program has kept rates flat for customers for 10 years and you want to get rid of it? Okay, I mean, and that's the way they pushed it. But when you look at it, formula rates did a lot to benefit the customers and throughout the state of Illinois for all energy electric customers, ComEd and Ameren. Now we're going to enter into this new phase of regulatory constructs. And again, a lot of it that customers will pay for on their energy bill will be programs and other types of costs that are not going to be associated with the pure energy bill. The electric commodity that you're paying for, the gas commodity, we're going to see increases in the bill, but not so much for your electric usage. You're going to see those increases for other ancillary type of products and programs. So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. Our goal at Ameren, Illinois is to try to be as transparent and open with the customers as possible and let them see their bill every month. Here's what you're paying to Ameren, Illinois for your electric and your gas usage. Here's what you're paying to the state of Illinois, for these 8 different programs that is included, these mandated fees that we have to assess the customers for. And so I think the more we can educate those customers, the better off they will be.
Hey, Senator, I know Justin and John are just chomping at the bits to jump in here, but if I'm going to jump in front of them because Michelle and Richard both just put a stake in the ground around costs being flat since these programs have gone in place, and it's a similar acknowledgement that we have on the gas side as well, a revelation that we share with our customers and some of these stakeholders. But the irony of this legislation, and one of the themes is that and John talked about it earlier, the gas is not clean, and they want to possibly get rid of gas. You talked about the gas versus electric stove. Well, the truth is, all of our bills have been flat, and it's been on the back of natural gas. It's been on the back of natural gas for heating homes. It's been on the back of cheaper natural gas for generating electricity. That is the affordability, and the irony to me is, that's the elephant in the room. And if we're concerned about affordability, to even contemplate, getting rid of natural gas, this early in the game, all of our renewables gains that we've made have come because natural gas allows for those renewable resources to be dispatched. So we're talking about the value of natural gas here across the electric, across the gas distribution, along with the some efficiencies and reliability improvements from these programs. But the irony is, there's serious discussions about what role natural gas should play in the future, and it's our most abundant and affordable resource from an energy perspective. And one other thing I'll say, just as it relates to this belief that these mechanisms we have now, and Senator, I think you asked about the impact if they go away and we go to this more traditional performance-based rate making. Well, we have the qualified infrastructure rider that we collect for our modernization program. And the belief that there's no oversight is just wrong. It's just dead wrong. There's appropriate oversight of that program. Now, the impact for us and our infrastructure rider will go away, sunset at the end of 23. If in fact we have to go to another rate recovery mechanism, yeah, the program will continue. But will it continue at the same pace to get the kind of gains in terms of environmental improvement, cleaner, less methane in the environment, better reliability? It will absolutely will not continue at the same pace. It will also drive up costs. Obviously there now becomes a bigger, just because of the regulatory lag associated with the traditional rate making, there's going to be more carrying costs that customers are going to be asked to pay. So, the programs will continue, but it certainly won't be as efficient, I don't believe, as those riders that were put in place to get those gains quicker.
I would just make a few comments. I think Richard, Charles, and Michelle have basically said it all, but I think we all watched what happened with the winter storm in Texas a few months ago. And after the polar vortex here in Illinois in 2019, a lot of people don't know this, but Peoples Gas and Nicor Gas were featured in an American Gas Association study for how their systems held up during the state's coldest temperatures in history. We were featured. We were able to do this because of the investments that we were allowed to make in our system. And so a lot of times people are not thinking about this because you don't think about what happens until something very, very bad happens. And so I think all of us were able to see when you don't make the investments in your system, what could happen. And so we're very, very supportive of a constructive regulatory process, whether it's formula rates that appears to have worked on the electric side, or the continuation of this QIP, or anything otherwise that allows us to make the kinds of investments so that our systems, whether it's electric or gas, can meet the reliability needs of our customers in an affordable way. I think that's what we have to be focused on. And I think we keep coming back to the same, process of we need to be included in the conversation, because oftentimes you don't hear these things when you're making these decisions in isolation. So I think I'll just leave it with that. Remember the winter storm in Texas.
Yeah, listen, I've got very little to add, but I do want to chime in a little bit. A couple of things. One, I'm going on a year and a half, almost 2 years in Illinois, coming from the East Coast and the South before that. And I will say this February in 2021, we experienced some pretty significant polar type temperatures in the southern part of the state. And as far as impacting water operations, Ameren did a great job, Richard's team, in keeping our operations up and going so that we didn't have an incident like Texas. To the QIP, Charles and John, we have it as well. We have a water version. And I try and explain it like the dentist, okay? Those abilities for a constructive environment where you have a rider allows you to go for those checkups on an annual basis. And if you do that, you're going to avoid the very costly and painful results of not doing that ongoing maintenance that's required on a regular basis. So you don't have Texas, you don't have those catastrophic events where, like John said, people realize, where's my service? I flipped the switch, it's not on. And that's an ongoing message that we've got to continue to deliver to customers, to stakeholders, on why those annual checkups are so very critical, so that you don't have an incident where you're biting into something at lunch and you got a real problem in your mouth. So I'm with you, completely agree, and we see it even in the water and wastewater side.
I think also tying in affordability and reliability into you all's, I guess I'm backtracking a little bit, into you all's investment in these communities and the companies in these communities. It has truly enhanced, I personally, my business has been enhanced as a result of the issues around reliability and the issues around affordability. So I'm very appreciative, and I'm sure other minority businesses that have truly benefited, we talked about it earlier, but I think they all go together. Justin, as you talked about that checkup annually, I remember, and I'll be very brief on this, I remember as a little boy, they used to have a Midas commercial. And the people would show up and they would talk about their muffler. It was rattling a little bit. And they would ask the Midas man, hey, should I get this fixed? And he says, yeah. They say, is it urgent? He says, it's not urgent, but you should get it fixed now before it gets worse. And the people would come back 6-7 months later and it's making this loud noise. And whatever price they were given 6 months earlier, they say, okay, I'm willing to get it fixed for $200. They said, no. They said, it costs more than $200. And the slogan was, you either pay me now or you pay me later, but you will pay me. And I think it's important for our consumers to understand that that's important, that reliability and affordability are based upon preventative measures versus waiting for that muffler to get worse and us expecting that you're going to pay the same cost. So I think in my mind, the QIP, the formula rates or performance base rates or things that benefit consumers or the ratepayers, benefits our environment, as well as creates economic benefits in those communities as well. So I applaud you all for it. You know, and Justin, I want to give you another opportunity to discuss some of your preventative measures and the fact that there are some costs associated with it. And I think you talked about it earlier, but I'd like for you to be a little more detailed as to really what the solution that you all are providing for these smaller or even in some instances, urban areas that are struggling with their water and sewer systems.
Yeah, there's, one difference. We've talked on this panel about electric, gas, and water, the similarities and the differences. And one of the biggest things that we focus on is partnering in new communities. And there's an opportunity to work with municipalities where they divest themselves of their water and wastewater systems for us to then take ownership. The rationale and the reasoning for that, there's a lot of different reasons, but to your point about a little more detail, one of the biggest is water quality. And kind of going back to the Flint reference that you did at the beginning, which captivates everybody's attention. There's, 150 million chemicals, and there's so many more each day. And I think 80 are regulated by the EPA. There is an environmental water quality challenge that is only growing more stringent each and every day. And it gets to be a point where certain municipalities, they can't keep up. And it's not necessarily their fault at all, because it's not reasonable to try and maintain compliance from a small system that may have certain things like PFAS. That's something that is in the news a lot. They call it a forever chemical, but a lot of industrial, Teflon, a lot of your cookware, firefighting foam produces these chemicals. Well, that foam or that fire extinguishing mechanism has got to wash down some drain, which eventually gets into some source of water, which has to be cleaned to get to your tap. There's a lot of processing and technology that you've got to implement to do that. And it's almost unfair for a small community to necessarily have the expertise and the technology, the infrastructure to even be able to try and do that. And that's just a challenge for their community, their constituents, for the cities that's where Illinois American Water is in a wonderful position to come in and use our scale, our expertise to try and help out. And a lot of times they're actually under consent decrees where the environmental regulators have stepped in and said, listen, you've got to fix this. And then at that point, to your Midas reference, they don't have the money or the wherewithal to try and do that. We offer a solution where we can come in and commit to do that and use our scale, but then also our constructive rate making, because we can allocate those costs for that large investment over our entire customer base, which is all throughout the state of Illinois, in multiple regions. So that's one of the biggest things that we can do. But another thing I want to mention around the affordability piece that I didn't earlier when we were back on the legislation topic is we were successful in getting through a first of a kind bill for the entire country that provides a state low income water and wastewater assistance program. And it's very similar to what Illinois has for the electrics and gas. That's a supplemental LIHEAP program on top of the federal support. And we took that model and we said there's no reason that water and wastewater customers should not also have access to that kind of assistance. And I got to give the legislator credit, the commission, all stakeholders were very supportive, the AG's office. And beginning next year, that will be a program available to any water or wastewater operator, municipal or regulated, if they choose to opt in and participate. And it'll be run through the DCEO, similar to the electric and gas LIHEAP. And those are kind of some examples in a little more detail, Senator, of what we try to do. And I think some communities that would be an example is East St. Louis. Okay, we serve their water. We've been doing that since the late 1800s. They have wastewater challenges, and we see an opportunity there to try and come in and help. But in order to do that, we've got to have some constructive rate making to really help us make it affordable, quite honestly, to make the investments needed for those customers.
I want to shift the topic just a little bit or maybe change the tone, because I don't want anyone who's listening to this to believe that any of you all are against renewables. I think that the real issue is going back to this same two words, reliability and affordability, because this will go through you all's systems. It will go through your infrastructure, and ultimately you will send the bill out. And I think it's important that everyone understand that none of you all are against renewables, but it's just you all are held accountable for whether that power comes on or it doesn't come on, or the cost that's associated with it. Richard, you've been vocal on this. You want to make a comment?
Well, I do, because it is something that just just bugs me a little bit. But for example, we had an issue, and it's just not reliability and affordability. It's safety. And Michelle, you probably know more about this than I do from a technical standpoint. But we had an issue with one of the solar providers about having a disconnect switch on the solar installation, and they are trying to want to get regulation as well as some tariffs passed to where they don't have to install this disconnect. Well, we believe, and I guess you could have both sides of the story, but we believe that disconnect is important to protect the workers, our workers. If our firemen, first responders, if there's something that happens, they know if there's gas to that house, they call us, we can come and disconnect that gas off. If it's electric to that house, we can come, we know how to disconnect that gas or that electric, and they can enter that house and fight the fire or whatever the emergency is safely. When they want these interconnections, we have to make sure that our workers are safe, or first responders are safe if they're going to respond to, say, a home with solar panels or a solar facility. And because we're going to be the first ones to call. You have a solar facility, they're not going to call a solar developer and say, hey, there's an emergency out here. We need to make sure you disconnect the services. So we have some concerns about that. And I think the utilities have to be involved in those discussions. It's not that you're against solar. It's like, let's make sure if we're putting these things out there, they have to be safe. They have to be safe for the consumer. They have to be safe for our workers that are out there in the field, first responders. And so those are the things, and that's why it's important, in my opinion, that, you know, we have these discussions with everybody who's involved, with all the groups have to be at the table to say, hey, wait a minute, you know, how about this? Let's look at this from all angles. And we're not saying we're against it. We're just saying we got to make sure it's safe. It's going to work when we need it to work. It's going to, you know, do the things that we expect it to do. And that's how we actually are going to get to, you know, a clean energy future that is affordable and that is reliable. And I think that's what all of us want. We want something we want a clean energy system, but we want it to be affordable and reliable, and most importantly, safe.
Yeah, I was trying to not get too technical, but just to kind of add on, you know, we certainly have an interest and support clean energy. We are part of the communities that we do business in. We have that are interested in getting there as possible. We want to make sure that we get there without adversely impacting our customers. That's the reliability. I am ultimately responsible for the reliability and the integrity of the grid that's providing service to our customers. So there's some technical issues. There's just the physics of this stuff that has to be addressed, that we need to find solutions for. That if there's a concern, that's probably sort of the when we talk about reliability, the issue is these technologies, the solar technology, et cetera, can have adverse impact on the system from the physics of it and the way electricity works. And we need to listen to that and understand, yes, we want to make this work, but we're going to need to take a grid that was designed for one-way power flow 100 years ago and convert it to one that will enable all of this. Yeah. And it's not overnight, it's not easy, and we're going to need to make some investments and try some things out. And that's sort of the education and sort of the message we keep trying to put out there. And it gets, unfortunately, I think it does get seen as you're against renewables, and it isn't. It is, we want to make it work, but we've got to work together to make that happen.
And Senator, if I can, because I'm looking at the chat box and I see one of the participants certainly challenged me on renewables versus gas after my little shameless plug I put in for natural gas, and based on what it has contributed to affordability, reliability in the environment over the last 10, 15 years. That's factual. But going forward, what I think, you know, we all agree, this is not a binary decision. It's not, you know, traditional or renewable. It's sort of all of the above. And at some point, you know, with technology, with time, with people, the right people, as several of my colleagues have said, sitting in the room talking about the pluses and minuses, you know, it may not be renewable at the end of the day. I think we need to understand what the objective is and be committed to that. The objective is not natural gas. The objective is not nuclear. It's not coal. It's not renewables. It's a clean environment. It's a clean environment. And the good news, and I will support whatever gets us there the quickest. And we started on a journey, and I think along the way, we got some pretty good ideas on how we get there. But I guarantee you, the only thing for certain about the plan we have today is it won't be exact. It will be wrong. It will get tweaked. So I am not, you know, anti-renewables for sure. But I certainly think we need to understand, you know, our history, what we know about yesterday and how the system operated and what we need to make it reliable, and make sure we share that with other people that have the same long-term commitment to a clean environment that we have, not a commitment to a particular source or a particular technology?
Let me weigh in a little bit on this too, Senator. Obviously somehow we've been communicating that there's some apprehension to clean energy. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that that is not the case with me. And I know that's not the case with my colleagues here because I talk to them all the time. Most people know a little bit about solar. They know a little bit about wind. They don't know a lot about renewable natural gas, which is a sustainable and reliable non-fossil fuel that's produced from sources such as food and animal waste, wastewater, plants, and landfill gas. So these RNG projects that we've talked about and the commission has approved, it allows us to capture that methane from these sources and convert it into RNG, which is clean and non-fossil fuel that goes into our pipes. And so we've been pushing that, but the challenge with it is that, people need to be educated about it. If you think about solar and wind 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of education about solar and wind then either. And so I think this is really about wanting to have a seat at the table so that we can explain how we can help our legislators and everyone else who wants to get to a clean energy future get there. I talked a little bit earlier about a polar vortex. That is just one area where if you make a lot of decisions about getting rid of natural gas, you run into this moment when you have a polar vortex and you don't have the proper systems in place to be able to heat homes and businesses during that time frame. And you're looking at a tragedy and a disaster that people haven't planned for. And so I think it's really all about, bringing enough people to the table to talk about how to get to that clean energy future. I think we all have a perspective, and I certainly hope that we can continue sharing it.
I wanted to raise one other issue, and I appreciate you all's time. And the only other issue I want to raise is and express my appreciation for what all of you all did. Your companies made commitments to create opportunities and provide needed food and resources and heat and electricity during the time of the pandemic when times were hard. Does anybody want to expand maybe on some of the things they did? If not, I understand, but I at least want to express my appreciation for the things you all did during that point in time that you all probably haven't received credit for, and people really haven't acknowledged and maybe didn't even understand a lot of the things that you all didn't do or did during that period of time. But if there's an opportunity for you all to express some of the things that you did to let people know, then I'm giving you that opportunity.
I would just thank you, Senator, for pointing that out. And I think all the utilities and everyone on this call, had really understood the challenges that our customers have, and took steps. And I mean, I look around at the screen here. Every one of the companies did a lot as far as from the very beginning. The first week of the pandemic back in March, about 2 weeks in, I think all the utilities agreed to not disconnect customers, and that non-disconnection decision was made that lasted almost 18 months. That it just started back again, but no customers were disconnected for non-pay. I think then every one of us through our charitable contributions donated to everything from buying masks for social service agencies that are out there working, first responders, providing food banks for food banks, providing extra food and equipment for them, and trying to help the communities, the not-for-profits that are out there. All of us partner with numerous not-for-profit organizations. That's the best way for us to stay in our community. And I'm really proud of the fact that the utility industry really went to bat for a lot of those not-for-profits that was challenged, because all of a sudden their business is interacting with their clients, and all of a sudden they can't, or their clients' needs are greater than what they could actually help with. And so I know at Ameren, we donated almost $90 million to relief efforts. And I know every utility here made similar type of contributions to various not-for-profits trying to help during the pandemic. So I thank you for acknowledging that. And I know sometimes those things go unheard, but thank you.
And if I can, I know we're running out of time, Senator, and I won't restate what Richard has just stated, but most importantly, all of us continue to provide an essential service. While most people were at home working in the warmth or coolness of their homes, our employees were out in the streets making sure that our customers continue to be served that essential service. And that's what goes most unnoticed. So thank you.
Yeah, not many of our employees stayed home during the pandemic. I mean, those linemen, those gas technicians were out there every day trying to figure out, how do I keep the lights on and the gas flowing and still maintain, the COVID protocols, the social distancing, wearing masks, wearing gloves. It's hard enough work without all of those, and all of a sudden you're trying to do that same work with a mask on and not getting too close. So I really take my hat off to all utility workers out there across this country. I think I know ComEd, and I know our team, we just had 300 of our linemen come back yesterday from Louisiana. They went down to help New Orleans get their power back on. I'm sure maybe your team did too, Michelle. But those line workers and the gas techs are the first responders out there in many cases of a crisis. When your lights are out and you're cold and the furnace doesn't come on, I mean, in a disaster, the first person you're going to call is your local utility company, and those guys and men and women that come out there and respond, or do a fantastic job, I think.
And we could extend this conversation because some of our guys are still supporting Ida restoration, and we had sent some more to Texas. So this could extend into climate change impact on us and the need for resilient systems. We could go on for quite a while on this discussion.
James, Michelle mentioned. Go ahead.
The only thing that I'll add to what Richard and Charles and Michelle said is that we certainly want to give some credit to the commission. They certainly work with all of us, and we're on the same page in terms of providing that necessary support to our customers. So do want to give a shout out to them. We work very closely on that 18-month time horizon to make sure that customers had that financial relief during that time frame, and other programs as well.
And James, I know we're going to end, but I just want to make one comment, and I guess we could have a whole session on this, but I noticed one, Michelle said resilient in her comments at the end, and there was one question on the chat about resiliency of the system and security from hackers. And this came up yesterday, and as we talked about, Michelle talked about those jobs of the future in the business. Those cybersecurity jobs are going to be out there for not only the utility, but for every business. I mean, we've increased our cybersecurity department at Ameren, probably tenfold in the last year. And a lot of efforts go into cyber. And one of the challenges for people on the phone who's, small businesses, as you look to contract with companies in the future, your contract, or those contracts are going to include language that your systems are also secure, because as your systems start integrating with our systems, it opens our systems up for being hacked too. So as I talked to the commission yesterday, one of the comments that I made was, as we go forward for small businesses, they need to start paying attention to that now and starting get their systems in line, because if they want to do business with any bigger companies, the larger companies are getting so complicated and so much stronger with their cybersecurity systems, they may not be able to interact, and they might not be able to send their charges and share information and that type of thing. So that is going to be a challenge in the future. The utilities are really focused on it, and they're gearing this system up, and it's hard. Some of you probably know it's hard to get us emails sometime in our own systems because there's so many firewalls. And I know ComEd probably has this problem, and we have a problem because we have a nuclear power plant. Everything is blocked almost at every challenge you try to go through. So it's going to get more and more difficult. I just want to assure the people that's out there, the utilities are focused on cybersecurity for the future, not only on our internal systems, but on that equipment that we're putting out there in the field that's sending us information. And Michelle, I know is personally involved in doing that, making sure that's safe. So that is something that's a #1 topic almost at every board meeting of every utility in the United States, gas and electric and water.
I just want to, first of all, to Senator Claiborne, who obviously is an exceptional moderator, who obviously had a lot to do with a lot of things that we're talking about even today, and also wanted to extend to our panelists who, quite frankly, are the best in class in terms of their commitment to the state and their commitment to diversity, which is near and dear to my heart. I also want to just acknowledge the fact that too, that, a part of our conference has been focused on matchmaking. And we're proud of the fact that every utility company from Justin with Illinois American Water Company to ComEd, Michelle Blaze, to Richard Marks and Ameren, and to Charles with Peoples Gas and John Hudson with Nicor, all have had their procurement people at the ready, talking to African American businesses to do business. And quite frankly, we're proud of the fact that we had over 400 matchmaking sessions that will happen. It was just about overwhelming to us in terms of how much people were reaching out to our businesses. And it forced us to go back and take a look at some of our own challenges, because there was so much demand that we felt like we were running out of businesses to meet the demand at the same time. So I just want to say my hats off to the utility companies. We're glad that you got the bill passed. We know it wasn't everything that you wanted, but as we had discussed before, I think is that no one was going to get everything they wanted, but everybody's going to get something that they wanted. And I think that's how the bill ended up. And hopefully we get back to gas and get that bill on the table. And when that comes up, you can count on the chamber's support to help fight for the right things that make good business sense from our organization also. And I want to acknowledge Stephanie Hickman, who is the chair of our Energy Committee, and George Williams, who is one of our board members also, and also a critical part of our Energy Committee, for their work. When they go down to Springfield, I don't have to go. Stephanie, George, and their team go down and do what needs to be done, so I can sit back and just kind of ask the people who really understand what's going on. So again, my hat's off to everybody for the great work you've done. And I can't say enough about my good friend, the moderator, Senator James Claiborne, who has been the ultimate champion for business across the state. And he's still doing his thing, and he's still making things happen. And just proud of what the work that he does. We still have 5 or 6, 7 more minutes left, guys, if you want to continue, because our next session doesn't start until 3:00, which is our entertainment panel. We got some Hollywood movie stars, and we're going to be talking about the power of media, the power of entertainment industry, which we hope people will stay on to listen to that conversation. I do have one question to ask of the panelists. We have focused on strengthening Black media has been a real issue for us, because we believe that, history is being able to tell his story, and Black media tells our story. And it's important for us to have strong Black media in the state of Illinois. And so one of the things we've done is that we formed the Black Media Fund. And I'm proud to say that Black media follows the lead of the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. We work very closely together to make things happen. So when good legislation happens, we fight together to make sure it happens. I would encourage all of the leadership to always put some money aside for Black media, because I think when we do that, I think that gives us an opportunity to get to our communities in a way that mainstream media doesn't reach, that has credibility, but also it kind of strengthens our hand. So when issues come up that impact us, that we're able to partner with you guys in making it happen. So I'd love to be able to kind of follow up with all the leadership about, how to support Black media across the board, because you're already supporting Black business, and supporting Black media would also be kind of important. So I'd like to, if anyone wanted to comment to that, or I sure would like to just acknowledge that.
Well, Larry, I agree with you. And I'm a former journalist. So,
Okay.
I certainly understand the importance of supporting Black media. We're doing that at NICOR through several of our partnerships. And it's also a priority for Southern Company, our holding company. So I'd love to talk more with you about that. Count us in terms of being a partner on that effort. And let us know if we need to do more.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah, following on that, I think one common theme through this whole panel has been raising awareness, messaging to our customers, stakeholders, and certainly that is an important medium to do that, Larry. So I know that your team has been instrumental helping us historically in certain areas, Peoria especially. So we too are willing to definitely engage in that conversation further.
Thank you, Justin.
I agree, Larry. I mean, you and I have had this conversation a little bit in the past, and I think, getting the right information to the media is important. And I think, working with Black media helps get the information to certain segments that probably aren't going to hear it, that hearing, both sides of the issue. Sometimes certain groups show up in minority communities when they want something and they're not around at other times. So they're only getting part of the story. So I agree, and anything we can do to help with that, we will. And so, we cover 44,000 square miles across the state of Illinois. And so there's a lot of pockets that we feel the traditional media doesn't reach. And so we try to find other opportunities to do that. So it's a great opportunity for us.
Thank you, Richard.
Larry, I only add ditto to everything everyone just said. I'll be happy to follow up with you on that.
No problem, Michelle. Always nice to see you, Michelle. Well, guys, let me just say to everyone.
Hey, Larry, can I just maybe a housekeeping? There was quite a few questions in the chat that I don't think we had a chance to answer, but I would love to follow up with some of these folks. Feel free to reach out. Questions about our schools, I notice our line schools, et cetera. We'd be happy to follow up. We didn't get a chance to address them.
Well, Senator Claiborne has the ability to go another 5 to 7 minutes if you'd like to answer any questions that you have. We would extend that for those who would like to, if you'd like to respond to any question, Michelle.
There were quite a few, Larry.
Okay. I didn't look at the chat box, but I would expect that would be, you guys would be a hot topic with a lot of questions. So what we'll do, we'll share those questions with everyone.
Great.
And make sure that we can get a response back to everyone.
Great.
Again, thanks everyone.
I want to end, if I can, very briefly. I want to say the commitment that you all have made to your vendors, particularly your African-American companies and female-owned companies, will be generational transformation. And we want to make sure, I'm sure my former colleagues want to make sure that you all stay in a position to continue to create generational transformational opportunities. And I want to thank you all as well. Thank you.